So I will do that now. Okay, so the dictionary definition, it comes from a Latin word, confligere, which means to strike together. So you can imagine two swords like hitting each other at the same time. And sort of in more common parlance, it's to be in serious disagreement about something, to be in opposition about something that's important. That's what conflict is described as, which seems to me a fairly reasonable definition that we probably mostly could agree on. Does that sound okay for folks? Okay, so on the mat, we have that simulated by somebody trying to punch our lights out or grab us or push us or whatever it is, strike us in some form. So we are negotiating conflict all the time within Aikido. So my first question for you guys is conflict a bad thing? Discuss. Who's got an opinion first?
It's a necessary and inevitable thing. I'm not sure it has a good or a bad.
Okay, so why is it necessary?
Because if we're going to resolve situations where we have desires or needs that are sometimes opposed or apparently opposed to some other person's desire or needs, we need to work them out.
Right. So that's why it's inevitable, because we're not always going to agree about what our needs are. Right. I agree. So it is inevitable, I agree. And but is it a bad thing?
No, it's not.
Tell me more, Steve.
It's not a bad thing because it helps people communicate. It can go the other way, but it's one of those words in the English language, or as you say, Latin, but it means both edge. It's a kind of positive and negative thing, and we have to join that together to resolve the situation.
Okay, so what's the positives
okay,
of
so
conflict?
The positive to it is that you can, without somebody having the conflict, you know, themselves pushing out, you wouldn't know that there was a problem in the first place, which needs to be dealt with. As we said last week, you need to know yourself, get to know yourself before you can actually do it. You can't deal with conflict unless you actually know yourself or been through that conflict.
True. If you're in conflict, I guess you definitely know what the other one's thinking, because they're making it very clear that they're in opposition to you. And I suppose that's a starting point.
If you an example would be a domestic violence, for example. It is very often in that type of situation obvious to an outsider what's going on, but it may not be exactly what is going on. So therefore, that's why positive and negative, you need both to analyze that situation.
Okay, so let's
go
on, finish, Steve. Sorry.
If I go out, I have to balance the conflict with trust. Okay, so therefore, to cross a road, I've got to trust somebody. I get it either two ways. You get where they want to help you, but you don't need it, or you need the help but can't get it. So it's a kind of getting around that before you can actually cross that road.
Sure. Let's come back to your domestic.
And it's the same. Yeah, domestic violence situation.
Yeah. So that strikes me as an example of extremely negative conflict. I can't see many
It's
positives in that.
No, it isn't positive to start with, but you've got to turn that into a positive situation. Otherwise, it will never be resolved, and
Okay,
it very rarely is. It's one of those situations that are very seldom resolved.
okay. So let's look at something like the First World War, right? That was a pretty terrible conflict, and we did resolve it because one side beat the other side. But was it a positive conflict? Did it work out well for anybody?
Well, Quentin, I'll have an observation there. It led to a 20-year...
Speak up, Alec. You're a bit quiet. You need to get nearer the mic.
Can you hear me better now, Quentin?
I can hear you better now.
Super. I mean, it could be argued that the First World War was followed by a 20-year truce, and then we had the Second World War, which was basically round two of the same.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I would say there was very little that was actually resolved by the First World War, other than the breakup of the Austro-Hungarian Empire and the Ottoman Empire.
Yeah. Yeah. No, yeah. I'd agree with you that. Linda, yes, please.
I think where's Paul? We need a distinction here. I'm hearing two different things in both the war idea and the domestic violence idea. Is that the war and the domestic violence to me seem like dysfunctional responses to conflict.
Yes.
Conflict for me seems like the underlying problem, and to put it in like the most generic, boring terms, you've got two kids and a red balloon and a blue balloon, and they both want the red balloon. How do you resolve it? Yeah. And one is go to war or beat the other kid up, but there are other ways to respond. But the conflict is who gets the red balloon.
Yeah. Okay. Absolutely. I think you're making a really good point. So conflict in itself, Alec, yeah, sure.
Yeah. I just want to give another sort of situation where conflict arises, but is probably positive. So with organisations, you do get a phenomenon called groupthink, where everybody agrees with each other and fails to see the obvious problems with the course of actions they're taking. And there, a conflict that may be raised by somebody giving an alternative view could actually be a very positive thing. Yep. Highlighting an alternative route that we can take, rather than just agreeing for the sake of agreeing and avoiding conflict.
Yes, I think that's you're reiterating what Linda's saying, which is that conflict doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. But when people use the word conflict, I would suggest to you that it's got a negative connotations. People automatically tend to think, well, conflict's bad. Well, it's not, because without conflict, we'd still have slavery. Without conflict, we would still be much more racist than we are and much more sexist than we are. Conflict can resolve an awful lot of problems. It's, as you're saying, Alec, you need people to speak up and say, hang on, I'm not sure this is right, and to question stuff. So conflict can be an incredibly positive experience if it's managed well.
To solve the balloon issue, it's that you paint the blue balloon red, and that solves it.
Well, that's very creative thinking. Well done, Steve.
But it's an excellent point. There can be lots of positive ways, where I say today you get the blue balloon and tomorrow I'll take the blue balloon. There's all sorts of ways that don't involve war and beating up the other kid. Exactly. Or painting the balloons. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So let's step back onto the mat. We're dealing with conflict the whole time, aren't we? So what's Aikido's relationship to conflict? Joanna?
I was thinking about two things in conflict. One is the transition between a good conflict and a bad conflict. So how can we can transform a good conflict, just like, okay, I think about the red balloon and you think about the blue one, but how do you transit for a good conflict to a bad conflict? We can go to that place, or how can we be in a bad conflict and transform it into a good conflict? By I was thinking that, okay, I want the red, but me and you, Quentin, we are supposed, both of us, to agree about the red balloon, but I like more the red and you like more the blue. So
yes, that's right, I do.
How can we transform this conflict, because we have different opinions, different wishes, in a good thing? Okay, you rather the blue balloon, I rather the red one, and that's okay. It's okay if we meet at the mat with different opinions.
Yep.
And how do you keep this conflict as, okay, we don't have the same opinion or the same wishes here, but it's okay for us to be different?
Yeah, but you go out and buy another pack of balloons, surely.
Yes.
Steve, you are just on a roll tonight. You really are. Such creative, positive vibes is how we resolve conflict. Okay, but let's come back to my question about what's Aikido's relationship with conflict?
One observation I would make, Quentin, is if you practice Aikido for any length of time, you will have experienced conflict in many, many forms, not just in the formalism of the attack, but when you're making an exercise and suddenly it locks up because you've clashed with your partner, there's a conflict. What is important then is not that there has been a conflict, but how you resolve that. You could resolve it by being judgmental and saying you're not following, you're anticipating, or you can resolve it by going, that's interesting. If I move this slightly different way, it goes away. If I make this feeling, it goes away. So it's reaction to conflict that I would argue is important.
Okay, I agree with you, but more fundamental, what's Aikido's relationship with conflict? What's the point? Why is conflict such a central part of the art?
Just to find a balance.
Yeah.
Just balance different energies and different energies.
Yeah, I would say so. I would say that Usheba's idea is to try and create a peaceful world. Well, if you can create peace when somebody's trying to knock your block off, then you might be learning something important that you can actually transition into the real world. So we're learning something really important within Aikido, how to manage conflict positively. Not to see it as a bad thing, but to see it as a chance to move on in some direction. So in my view, when you've got two people in opposition on anything, on a mat or in a discussion, there are basic. Yeah, Chris, do you want to step in and say something?
Well, I didn't want to interrupt you. I just wanted to be next, if I could.
Okay, that's fine. I would say there are basically three things that can happen. I can shift to your position. You can shift to my position. Or we can agree to disagree and still manage to find a way to get on in life without sort of bumping heads. And I think any of those is fine.
Quentin, there's another position.
Go on.
As well, which is one I prefer, which is a lot of my professional work, is you have a really good, robust discussion, have a right old argy-bargy about something and challenge each other's viewpoints, and then you both move on to a different place together.
Thesis, antithesis, and synthesis.
Yes.
No, absolutely, yes. So you both, the point is that there's a chance to grow in any of those positions, to become wiser than you were.
Yes.
I think.
Yeah.
Chris, add your wisdom to the conversation.
I see conflict as like a honing stone for the blade of attention and awareness. But I want to get my quote into the tape of Terry Dobson's perception, which was purpose of conflict is harmony. And then I wanted to speak from my own point of view, which is more in tune with O-sensei's, I can't remember the quote, but Aikido is resolving the conflict in your own heart. It's resolving the conflict of you or in you. If you take that act, you'll unify the field, and your aggressor in Aikido won't be an issue because you won't be in conflict with them. He said you become one with your partner.
I knew you'd take us back to last week in the end.
Yes, indeed. For me, and all the work I do with leaders, the question is, what consciousness are you operating from? From a conflicted consciousness, from a conditioned, limited human mind as your identity, or from consciousness itself, from open, transparent, present, compassionate awareness, from love, which I think was O-sensei's realization.
Yeah. Well, you've taken me, you segued me neatly into my next sort of, Linda, go on.
Oh, sorry, I was already unmuted.
You were.
Yeah, I hope someone can tell me what the source of this idea is, because it's not mine, but I think it's brilliant with regard to conflict. For me, a lot of what Aikido is, our Aikido training in conflict, is about being willing to enter into conflict and being comfortable in conflict, not having that be something like, oh, we can't go there. Having it be something where we can stay engaged and continue to work on it. And the best example I heard of that, and this is the one that I don't know where this came from, but it's not mine, is that if a good way to end a conflict is shoot the other guy. There, we're done. So a lot of the dysfunctional responses to conflict come from the being incapable of remaining in it and keeping our senses about us while we work it out. And instead, just like, I can't handle this, I have to end it.
Yeah. So I think the interesting part about that, Mike, I'll come on to you in just a second, is that absolutely, I think Aikido is very much about us being able to handle conflict and be happy to engage with it, not back away from it, because you don't resolve anything unless you engage with it. The second part, though, I would argue you never end it with the gunshot, because that gets the relations and the friends coming back and wanting to shoot you. So if we come back to the first,
yeah, but I get the red balloon
for a while.
Yeah,
exactly. I mean, that puts a stop to it right there.
Don't worry, Steve's got a whole bag of these red balloons. We're going to be okay.
Are we talking about compassion?
We are, in a way, because in the First World War, when the victors basically held down the losers, and that sowed the seeds for the Second World War. At the end of the Second World War, we supported the defeated in rebuilding their countries. The EEC resulted, and we've had 70 odd years of peace. So, you know, when you're actually trying to come up with a positive solution at the end of the conflict, you get a very different result. So
that's a great example.
Yeah.
Also,
have you any wisdom to offer? Because you've already been called upon in your absence, so we're wondering what you have to say on the subject.
You're asking me? Okay, I think that comfort with the ability to enter into a conflict and stay in it depends on what you do in your body. And if you don't open your body, make it gentle and receptive, you're not entering into it with comfort and compassion. You're entering into it with a sense of barrier and unokayness. One of the things I have people do, I used to before the virus came, was walk up close to each other and stand nose to nose, hold a conversation. Everybody's immediate feeling is, I can do it, but I want to pull away as I do it. And they're not being with the person. I basically think that I have to, in Aikido, come in with a sincere desire to injure and dominate. Then the person has the opportunity to not be bothered by it. If I come in too sweet and partnerish, it's okay, it's appropriate for a beginner, but at some point, somebody has to introduce some real winning. I'm going to win against you. Then you can do Aikido and feel not that you don't have to do that.
You can't resolve conflict positively if you don't have a genuine conflict to try and resolve. So
Right.
I agree with you 100%. Mike, did you want to kick in?
Yeah, I think a lot of conflict is sort of the conflict with the self and externalizing it onto other people, if you see what I mean. So a lot of things that we don't like in other people are represented within ourselves. So that's why we enter into a non-constructive conflict.
Yeah, that's the third time I've been segued into this, which is brilliant. So it comes back to what we were talking about last week, Chris, which is really the conflict begins within, doesn't it? And it's your point, Paul, about, you know, you need to be able to enter into a conflict with a nice open heart, not feeling fearful or aggressive. So it's you who have to sort yourself out before you're likely to get a positive resolution to any conflict. And that very much echoes what you're saying, Mike. You know, if you come with baggage, that baggage is going to be reflected in the conversation, isn't it? And most of us carry baggage. Simple as that. Yeah.
I heard a story about, Chris, you might know him, Ken Parker, I think it was, one of Nadeau's students. We got our showdown on the same day. He was walking down the street in San Francisco. Two people came up from the side, from in front, peeled off to the side, flicked open knives, and Ken looked at them and said, "Hi guys, can I help you?" And the one said, "Not this one," and they put their knives away and left.
Wow.
Wonderful.
Well, my perception of this is that conflict is a function of the human mind. The human mind is dualistic, and all conflicts stem from the assumption that we're in conflict with the rest of nature, that we are separate entities, which is, it turns out, not as true as we've been led to believe.
Well, it depends what you mean. We are separate entities, but we're interconnected and we form one whole creature in a way. But I don't think that the deer would be happy about knowing the wolf was going to eat it. There is, in some sense, conflict when I get what I want at your cost. But some of that's unavoidable. We have to eat something. Only vultures are truly moral.
Yes. And earthworms. Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Well, yes, I'm sure there's profound wisdom in that. I'm going to have to think on that one for a while.
It's good to hear. I hold myself as a vulture.
Okay, great.
Chris, apparently you're very, very moral then. Liz, what did you want to say?
Oh my God. Oh yes. When I sort of I was going distracted then, so I forgot what I was going to say. So I've reached that sort of age as well. With conflict, where I see it can turn out very negatively, is when there's a serious imbalance of power between the protagonists. Yeah. So the sort of positive sorts of conflict we've been talking about have been, conflict where all the parties can hold their ends up, can't they? Yeah. But if there's a serious imbalance of power, then you get some really nasty results.
Yeah.
Well, you can get serious, nasty results if there's an equality of power. Mutually assured destruction was the idea that if we had the same number of warheads, we were equal, and any conflict we had would be well, it wouldn't be nice, but it would be avoided or not so bad. I think it's called overkill.
I guess in many ways, Liz, much conflict is avoided by the fact that if I've got overwhelming force, you're never going to argue with me, are you?
Yeah. Well, I would.
Off with your head.
That's me.
Yeah, but in a way, I mean, it looks like there's no conflict going on, but of course you're fomenting something really, really serious further down the road, because empires never last forever, do they? And neither do powerful people. They decline as they get older, etc., etc. So, it's not really resolving things just by having overwhelming force and being terribly scary.
My long dead mother, bless her, always used to say she felt rather suspicious about marriages that seemed too perfect and where there were no arguments. Because she said that always meant that one person was completely dominating the other.
Well, no one's ever going to accuse me of that then.
It's healthy.
I must have a very healthy marriage, I reckon.
Exactly.
Okay, so how does Aikido help us deal with conflict positively? What is it that's special? What is it, do you think, if at all, that Aikido offers to help us deal with conflict?
Calmness.
Calmness. Okay, how does it do that?
Well, I think sort of conflict and arguments go very badly wrong when people lose control of their emotions. And if you stay calm, you can actually argue quite effectively, can't you, without losing the plot. You can stay on message and on track.
I agree. I think calmness helps you in a communication field be far more effective. But how does Aikido give you calmness?
It helps us when we're used to people trying to knock our block off with a big stick. If we can deal with that calmly on the mat, we can deal with our boss being peevish about the way we've handled the complaint with relative ease.
That's in theory.
It's a stressful situation.
So what is it that we're taught in Aikido that allows us to deal with somebody trying to knock off our block? How is it we acquire this calmness through the practice of Aikido?
I don't know how other people did it. I couldn't do it in any way that I was told because I couldn't understand how people were talking. What I finally figured out was to examine my physiology. And when I tightened or felt a barrier, I discovered when I was feeling kind and aware, then my body relaxed better and I could move better. This is something that I started to understand in a very different way, listening to Mary and Molly Hale back to back. And I've been puzzling, how did I get to be, I think I remarked about fighting spirit. In the hard arts, you hit things hard and you stop feeling the withdrawal and you hit trees and stuff and you come through it feeling I can do anything. In Aikido, we don't hit things hard, but we come to the same thing. We just don't call it fighting spirit, I think.
We have to develop a strong spirit, I think, to be able to,
yes.
to deal with, well, aggression of any sort. So yes. So, and I think you're beginning to hit on what Aikido offers. So you mentioned two important words there. You said that when you learn to relax your body, it changed the movement. And you said something else that was insightful too.
Oh, amazing.
Oh, awareness. That's it. You said when you allowed yourself to be more aware, then you dealt more successfully with things too. So what else have other people got to offer on this?
I'll give you 1 point.
Which 1 point?
Okay, so translate that into more everyday language that other people will understand, Liz.
Okay. It's thinking about your center of gravity. In my old karate days, that would have been called thinking about your hara.
Okay.
This is, okay, I'm going to interrupt. This is absolutely wrong. The center of gravity is not what you mean. I know what you mean. The center of gravity when I bend, is this still in my body? It's outside of my body. The center of gravity is a mathematical average of the masses. So you want to call it center of action. Center of gravity is simply not the right term. Okay. That's one of my pet peeves, as you can tell.
Okay, so what you have introduced, though, Liz, is this idea of centering.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
when we move from a centered place, and you're right, Paul, the center changes depending on what you're doing with your body and how you're interacting with other people or the situation. It changes all the time. But centering is a really important part. And I think it brings you back to what you love to play with, which is the body. You know, when we use our body in a anatomically sensible way as it's designed to be used, we tend to find that we are centered. You know, when we're at our most efficient, when our muscles are really tight, comes back to your relaxed muscles again. And when we're structurally sound and well aligned, so everything supports each other, we naturally find we're centered. So good.
And that's interesting because there's a very physical route to centering. I would also argue there's a mental route to centering, and some people find that easier. So by having a mantra like think of your 1 point, or have a like posture, or whatever mantra it is that works for you, instead of having the shopping list mentality of everyday life cluttering up what you're trying to do, you can focus on one simple thing, which allows you a mental route into the same state that you're looking for through those physical exercises that you're talking about in terms of, you know, relaxing, opening, 1 point, center of action, whatever the phrases you want to use. There are 2 ways of coming at it.
Well, I'll speak for Paul before he does, because I like doing that.
Somebody should.
He would say that, you know, mind and body, and, you know, they're not 2 different things. We're just one entity, basically. But I get what you were saying about this. You can access a centered state by thinking certain things, thinking nice things, and putting yourself in a good mood, and then you tend to find that physically you are relaxed and well aligned. So you can access it by thinking about your body and how that's structurally being used, or you can access it by, as you said, mental process as well, but you can end up in the same place.
Yes.
They're the same thing. They're just different languages to access different facets of ourselves.
Yeah.
The way I like to teach it is let your pelvic floor muscles hang loose.
Yeah.
So if you do that, that's very concrete. You can feel your guts and your anal sphincters and genital sphincters hanging loose. And if you do that, you can't get uptight.
Yeah. So in my language, mind affects body and body affects mind. And in Paul's language, they're the same thing anyway. So
Yeah.
it's all
Mind doesn't matter and matter doesn't mind.
Yeah, I like that. That's good.
You can quote it. Just you don't have to attribute it.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, so we've got centering, we've got awareness. What would that relate to in the 4 rules, Liz? For Joanna?
I was thinking about the how. So we have been going with this in our group of Aikido, that part of them, it's like Chris said, the other class, it's Aikiwaza, and the other part, it's more Aikido. So how do we respond to the situation? So like one of my sensei said, do 300 cuts with the sword at once. And okay, it's not that he's telling me that, but how am I answering that? If I don't agree, if I have a conflict with that idea. So it's just shifting from, it's not about what the person said to you, or not about how the other person grabbed your wrist or give you a strike or a tsuki or whatever, but also how do you answer to that? How do you have the conscious of your body, and or how do you know the other person's body, and then okay, this person's, I know that woman, she's gonna strike me like that, and then we are aware of the how each one of us behave.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it's kind of blending these 2, Aikido and Aikiwaza, and how do we answer with these situations, and not just how the other person is gonna attack me or practicing Aikido with me. It's
yeah.
I don't know about the 2 sides.
Well, Tim, you talk about the 4 principles. You know, think of your 1 point, completely relaxed,
Yeah.
have a light posture.
Yeah.
So were you trying to get to extend your mind?
Yes.
Is that what you're trying to get to? There you go. Give me your intro.
Yeah. Awareness is just putting yourself out there in the world and taking in maximum information, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's maybe one definition of extending ki, but it's far more meaningful to you and me. But the more information you have, the more likely it is that you'll resolve the situation in the most positive way. Yeah. Coming back to what you were saying, Linda, can I come back to you in just a sec? Coming back to what you were saying, Joanna, I think, you know, the interesting thing is, what are people's definitions of what Aikido is about? Because for a lot of people, it is about the Aikiwaza and being able to, you know, put people on the mat any time, and that for them is you know, that makes them feel good, and that gives them, you know, that's all they're aiming to do. But it isn't Aikido, because you've only got one victor there, and you know, the guy who keeps getting beat up isn't going to feel great about that. So he's going to carry, he or she will carry that into the future, and it'll come back on you somehow. So for
Yeah,
me,
that also
it's absolutely essential within Aikido that both parties end up feeling happier about the situation at the end of it.
I was talking today with one of the ladies that we're gonna meet Aikiwaza all over the place. It's not only on the mat. We have Aikiwaza everywhere. So how are we responding to that? The question is the how. How do we?
One of the, I do think of verbal Aikido, and I know with Luke Archer, and I know what Luke would say. Luke would say when somebody's rude to you, his view is it's just an opportunity to practice. So you approach it with a sense of gratitude because you think, great, now I can try and do something better than this than just beat this person up. You know, so if that's your mindset, that it's an opportunity to practice and to get better yourself and to help this other person get better, do you know what? Over time, that's going to happen. You may not be very successful straight away, but over time, if you always go into it with that mindset, then you'll get much more skillful at it. And you will get better outcomes as you practice more often.
Yes, sure. Thank you.
Linda, did you want to say something?
Yeah, thank you. It occurred to me that we're talking about one side of the dysfunction and resolving conflict. Shooting the bastard, beating somebody up, being hard on them, dominating a country in a war. But there's another side to the dysfunction, and this is something that Aikido really helped me with because I was good at this dysfunction, is the like giving way. Like, oh no, it's okay, you can have that one. And this conflict is still there. It's still a dysfunctional response to it, but I wasn't willing to go, let's talk about this. I'd like to have that one. You know, so that's a way that Aikido can really help us work with conflict. Is if we are on the side of giving way, it teaches us to enter in.
I think it brings us back to that playing with your shadow thing there, because that's a conflict going on within that you don't want to stand up and be shouted. Yes, step up to the plate and say what you've got to say, but that still sits inside and it churns and you feel resentful and, you know, absolutely.
It doesn't really resolve the conflict. It stops the conflict in the same way that shooting the other guy stops the conflict. Okay, it's apparently ended, but it hasn't resolved it.
It's the other side of it, isn't it? It's the same result, but the other side of it. You know, allowing yourself to be the victim is not a solution to a conflict.
Right, and it comes from that same unwillingness to be in the conflict and work on it.
Yes. Yeah.
I think there are moments when you are called upon to just kill somebody. If you stop the conflict, then there's a chance of healing or progressing further. But if you don't stop some conflicts, then things are really going to get worse. So I think Aikido does offer us the tools to flat out kill somebody or break somebody if we need. But if we do it with a spirit of anger or hatred or separateness or alienation, then we've become a perpetrator as well. So the hardest thing, I think, I don't know that I could do it, there must be a saint somewhere who could, is to kill with love.
Could I just add to that, which is that I was taught in old traditional karate, the mantra, you know, the sort of the rules, kill or injure nothing without good reason.
Right, and without goodwill.
And without goodwill, yes.
Does everybody agree with that? Are we comfortable with what Paul's saying? Yeah, I agree. I think there are moments where, you know, if it's you're faced with your life or their life, then, you know, if you didn't start it, someone's got to end it. It's not always you know, it's not always the wonderful resolution that we would like to have. But yeah, I think, yeah, you're right, Paul.
And there's always the plus that you take the guy home for your compost heap, you get a lot of extra nitrogen that way.
That's true. Yeah, and then you've got a big vegetable bed to, you know, those tomatoes need a lot of that.
Yeah.
So that's true. That's true. Okay, so yes, we'll come back to just what does Aikido promote, and then we're just about done, I think, for today. So we got awareness, we got relaxation, we got centeredness. We're missing one, aren't we, Liz?
Oh God, I'm half asleep here. Go on. You need
Oh.
to. Thank you. Have a light posture. Have a light posture.
All right. So, okay, nobody in the world knows what have a light posture means. So, what does that mean in English language?
Ability, flexibility, and an ability to react to the world around you.
Being light on your tootsies like a
Being
belly
able
dancer.
to move in any direction, both mentally and physically.
The word that springs to mind for me is grounded, actually.
Yeah.
That you're very grounded, and you've got a clear sight of what's going on physically. You know, you're solid as well. So it's interesting that you're going to the opposite extreme. This idea of being flexible and light of posture, which I think, it is part of have a light posture. I get, yeah.
I'm very aware of having light feet when I'm doing it. So a bit like a ballet dancer.
But remember that the iteration from Toei Sensei was keep weight underside.
Yes.
Not have a light posture. So keep weight to some side works with groundedness. Have a light posture, not so much. Linda, did you have something to offer there?
I'm not sure I do. But the idea of have a light posture to me has, I can see both. I did this motion of having like there can be a drawing up and down. You know, the grounding is one side, but you also need the upward. You know, there's probably something about standing on a floating bridge somewhere, but I think there's both directions. There's a balance.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that you can be both grounded and not be like stuck. To me, grounded can be a very stuck, solid,
Equally,
so I don't think they're in conflict. I don't think they're contradictory. The having a light posture and being grounded.
I think there's times to be grounded and solid in one place. If I'm standing on the edge of a cliff and not got anywhere else to go, I'm going to be very grounded and hold my ground. But sometimes, being able to move away from that position works really, really well as well. Running away is quite a good way sometimes of just avoiding a conflict when you don't need to have it. We can choose our battles too. I think that's one of the things that Aikido does. We can choose whether it's worth the energy to engage or not. And I think that's a big one with children, isn't it? Is it worth it? Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. And that's often the difference between good parents and bad parents, I think, deciding when to fight your battles. Okay, I'm about done on whatever I wanted to say on conflict. Is there anybody else that has anything else that they'd like to offer to close this session off?
No.
Well done, Paul. Decisive as ever.
You're picking a fight.
Politely.
Somebody say yes.
It's all the same.
Okay, I hope that's kind of been insightful for you guys. If you're at all interested, I did actually write a blog on conflict, which you can find on the Burwell website, which you might find of some interest as a sort of summary of kind of where we are, where we've taken this today. But yeah, I think next week we're interviewing Mary Heine. So it's sit her down and get her to tell us about her Aikido history. If it's not next week, it's the week after. I will obviously confirm. But I think it's quite rare. She doesn't usually do interviews, and certainly not having them recorded. So I'm rather pleased to have her here. So I think that'll be fun. You'll enjoy it.
Quentin, is this another one where we can contribute to her?
She's not expecting it. No, I mean, if you want to, she'll always, I'm sure she'll be happy. But I said, is this okay to do this one for free? And she said that was okay.
Okay.
It's being recorded.
Thank you.
I've got my parish council meeting next week, so I won't be joining you.
Well, I think it will be okay to record it. I didn't want to record the technical session because I thought that was like taking her intellectual property, and that wasn't right. But I think she's happy for me to record an interview, so it will be available if you can't make the session. Okay, final thoughts?
Thank you very much, Quentin.
Thank you, Quentin. Appreciate it.
Good to see you all. Have a good week and enjoy.
Lovely. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.